Hi, this is my first online live talk on Open Value Meetup, so I'm pretty excited to be here. And I'm happy to get the chance to talk about some stuff which also interests me as well. And it was quite fun preparing it. But let me first introduce myself. As already Roy said, I'm a full stack Java developer at Open Value. I have over 14 years of work experience. I'm doing development and operations. I really love Linux and open source software. And I can remember that I installed my first Linux almost 20 years ago. So it's quite some time. So I'm talk a little bit about remote debugging, give you an overview of the infrastructure, give some protocol details, and at the end, I will do some live demonstration. Okay, so what is remote debugging? Basically, this is nothing new. Remote debugging has been around for years. And yeah, why I'm talking about old technology, it's because I'm someone who wants to get to the bottom of things. I want to know how things work in the background. And the IDE does a lot of things for you and hides a lot of things from you. So you don't necessarily need to understand how things work in order to use them. And this is why I want to give some explanation and demonstration about how things are working, that you can get a better view of how the things are working in the background. So what are we doing? We are actually debugging an application like you would do in your local project in your local IDE. But the thing is, I'm gonna connect to a Java process on a remote host. During the debugging session, we can pause the application using breakpoints. We can step through instructions inside the code and look into variables and everything or almost everything which you could do in the debugging session on your local machine. Why do I remote debugging? Probably a lot of you have already heard the words, it works on my computer. Yeah, but sometimes it fails on production. Maybe it's some special constellation of how things are working together. And probably this fails and you don't know why it's failing. So you can keep on debugging on your local code, but you can also connect to some production-like environment and test the code in a production-like environment on your local machine. So this is something I would say it's a production-like environment. You have a web browser. You connect through a firewall to some server cluster with a database or database cluster in the back. So what I want to do is I need to pass the firewall. We are here in a production-like environment, so I need to pass somehow the firewall. And usually this is done by using some SSH jump server or something like this, which is a introduction, a single point where you can connect passing the firewall. And this is hardened, secured, that no external user who is not allowed on the machine or the production cluster can get access to it. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the protocol details. For debugging, I'm using the Java Platform Debugger Architecture, Jpda. This is an architecture for debugging Java applications. It provides standard interfaces for debugging, and this has been around for years. Yeah. And part of the Jpda is the Java Debugger Wire Protocol, which allows you to do remote debugging, which is a protocol for remote debugging of the Jpda, and it allows remote connections over network sockets. The instruction how I call it is Java with some arguments, and at the end I'm calling just a jar. I'm running a jar. And yeah, the other side is how do I connect to the remote application server? I use an SSH, which can use multiple jump servers transparently, and I can forward remote sockets to my local computer. So the debugging port, which I open in the Java application, I can forward through the SSH connection to my local machine. So basically, afterwards, I need to connect to localhost on the port, and this gets transported over the SSH connection. Okay, so let's start with the demonstration. I have created a server where we have a Java application. I'm gonna start this one now, and you can see it's listening for debugging connections on port 8000. And yeah, to use this one, I'm gonna do an SSH connection to the remote server, and I'm gonna forward my local port 8000 TCP on my local machine to the remote server. I'm directly connecting to the remote server, so it's from the point of view of the remote server, also localhost and port 8000. Okay, so I have a connection open now. Now let's check if things are working. I created some web page in here where you can refresh and you get a list with some data. The content is not important, but I want to just show you that this is a web page. And if I hit refresh, then you can see activity in here where the application is actually running. All right. Now I'm gonna open up my IDE. In this case, it's Intellij, but I think almost every IDE allows connection to some remote port. At least I know from Eclipse and Intellij. Maybe you ask your documentation, or maybe you can also ask me if you have any questions. Then I would look it up for you. Okay, so I set up some remote debugging configuration, which connects. I'm sorry, it's quite tiny, but it connects here to localhost and port 8000, which is actually the port of my SSH connection, which I just opened up. So, and then I hit debug, and yeah, it's green. I'm connected to the target VM, and yeah, now I can start debugging. I'm gonna do some breakpoint and check if it stops. And yeah, it is stopping. I can step through the instructions. I can take a look at the variables. I have a local variable and a global variable. And yeah, not much special about it. So, and while I'm in the debugger, you can see that there is activity on the application side. So now you see open, then I step through, and you see the lines are appearing. Okay. So nothing special yet, if you're used to using a debugger. Let's make it more interesting and bring in a second client. So at the first client, I'm restarting, I'm at the breakpoint, and then now I'm in a debugging session, and I want to say, okay, I don't want to disturb the other developers, so I'm removing or deactivating my breakpoint and let the others do. So this was quite, yeah. When I was preparing the talk, then I stumbled upon this because now I have no breakpoint, and I'm reloading my page, and it doesn't go. And I thought, hey, what's going on here? Why is my application not working? I removed the breakpoint. What's going on here? And then I said, okay, I don't know, maybe there's a failure or so. And then I stepped through the code and went on. And then, okay, my page refreshed. So what's the missing point here? And then I realized that I'm just doing a regular breakpoint, which is by default stopping the whole JVM or the whole process. If you want to stop only for your own process or for your own thread, then you need to select here thread. And then let's try it again. So I'm stuck in the breakpoint. I will remove it. And then I hit refresh in here. And as you can see, this is working. And while I'm here in the debugging session. Yeah, which brings me to the next point. I'm currently in the debugging session, and I want to look at variables, and I want to try a little bit with the variables. And then I step over it, and okay, global is currently 0, so let's change this one. So I'm just setting it to 1, 2, 3, whatever. So now it's 1, 2, 3. And if I step over it, then you can see here global is 1, 2, 3. Now I hit refresh on my second client. And you can see the global variable is also 1, 2, 3. So this is something that you need to consider, that if this is running within a singleton, then your debugging session might affect other clients, even if they are not stopped by the breakpoint. So,
Wolfgang, yeah. I have a question already here in the chat. So I assume that the code in your local EDA needs to be in sync with the deployed code running on the server. But what happens actually if that's not the case?
That's a pretty good question. If it doesn't fit to the remote code, I can show you just right away. Then my IDE is smart enough to notice it. Yeah, you can still debug it, but you get funny effects, I would say. So I set a breakpoint. I added an additional line here, and then I will restart. And yeah, now it looks like I'm at this line, but actually, if I continue, then I don't see the line being printed, because I'm one line above, actually. And then, sorry. No, actually, I'm one line below. Sorry. You see, if I step to the next point, I would expect to print out the local line, but the local line is already printed.
So can you say that the matching is done on the class name and line number?
Yes, you actually step through the binary code which is deployed on the remote machine. If it doesn't fit to your local code, then you get funny effects. Like, for example, if I place another few lines. Okay, this doesn't work while I'm in the debugging session, but now you can see, sorry. Or if I remove some of the lines, then you can see also here, this breakpoint, which formerly was here, is not active anymore. So I need to select a valid line, which is also valid on the binary code, which is deployed on the remote server. So now I start again here. Okay, so I think this was too much. Let's start it again. Okay, so now I'm here in my code, and as you can see, I would say that I already would have printed all the hashes, but if I step over it, then the hashes get printed now. And then I step, and then I am in a line which doesn't exist, or doesn't seem to exist. And then I step over the return, and I have to execute the curly braces. So yeah, funny effects, but it still works. You can still do it. All right. Yeah, as you already noticed, I can modify the global value. And I was able to affect other clients by modifying this global value. But what if I want to execute code which isn't already present? If you have done some debugging on your local machine, maybe you already have done something similar, but I think doing this on a remote machine makes it even, more interesting to me, because what I am evaluating here is some code on the remote machine. So I need to step in the debugging mode. Okay, now I can start evaluate expression. This can be setting some variable, but I can also do some complex code in here. So let's make it a little bit bigger. I'm doing some runtime execution in here, which is basically some shell commands. Yeah, I'm on a Linux machine, so I'm gonna call who am I. I'm gonna evaluate it. Sorry. Let's evaluate it. Okay, so who am I? It states Ubuntu. View text. Yeah, I'm Ubuntu. Okay. This is the user where the code is running. This is the user that I connected to, and I started the process. So nothing very spectacular or so. But since I'm on a remote machine, maybe I can take a look at some files. So let's evaluate this one. Okay, view that as text. Oh, okay. So now I'm able to see which users and therefore which services are installed on the remote machine. This is not so cool anymore if I expect that to be a hacker. And now what's really uncool is if the user which starts the Java process has sudo rights, which is pretty common if you are connecting with a normal user and start the process as a normal user, then you can see I'm root. So basically I can now evaluate any instruction over the remote debugging session with root rights. So since I'm expecting that debugging sessions is temporarily and the users are allowed to connect to the remote server, please be aware that if you leave some debugging session open, that this might imply some security risks. Okay. So I wanted to show you some little other thing. I think we still have a little bit of time. And what I wanted to show you is that I can not only do remote debugging, I can also do remote profiling. For this case, I installed Jprofiler on my local machine and also on the remote machine. There's a third-party plugin required, which needs to be started with the process. And this opens another port. And therefore, I also need another port forwarding to that port. And yeah, then I can start some profiling application and say attach to the local port, which forwards to the remote machine. And then, as you can see, I'm able to look into the memory consumption, how many classes are loaded, how many threads are currently running, CPO load, and also you can take a look at the heap, the loaded classes, the loaded objects in your application, and yeah, you can see there are some objects in here. Let's take a look for our forwarding controller, which we are debugging all the time. And yeah, let's analyze some references and also show in graph, which I always think this is quite handsome to get a graphical overview how things are connected to each other. And you can also open up and get some references. And then you can profile the application from a very different point of view. Okay, so that's basically it, what I wanted to show you. Are you having any questions or comments?
So are there any questions or comments? Please fill them into the chat. I have at least one. So normally when I have trouble with this kind of things, when I have to go through a couple of stepstones. So how you're handling, for example, debugging remotely if you need to go through multiple machines?
Okay, that's a good question. You can use parameters to the SSH server, to the SSH command, which allows you to jump over servers. But my favorite is using SSH configuration, which is in here. And right now, you can see that I'm directly connecting to the meetup host. But if I want to connect over some proxy host, then I can use, for example, like this. I can maybe say host jump. Host name is jump. And yeah, maybe you have to use a different user to connect to the jump server. Maybe you also need some different port. I don't know, whatever. And then you can say to connect to the meetup host, I want to use the jump server in between. This is by using the proxy jump. And then you refer to the name of the jump server, which is here. So, and using this, you can also concatenate multiple host configurations. And yeah, in this way, you can jump through over multiple jump hosts to your final destination.
Okay, cool. Thank you. There's another question. You show us a profiling tool rather quickly about when you profile. So what do you need for this profiling tool, and what's the name of this profiling tool?
The profiling tool is Jprofiler, which has also been around for plenty of years. This is a evaluation version, but this is a commercial tool. But there are also a lot of other profiling, Java profiling tools around. I would say I can't recommend one special profiling tool. You need to select the one which fits best for your problem.
Great, thanks. There's another question. So you told us that it's kind of dangerous for having debugging ports open and showing us what you can do. So how can you identify these ports, like for example in a port scan?
How can you identify? This is a really interesting question. I would say unless this is a well-known port, right now I have no idea how to identify it only by connecting to it. Maybe if you suspect this to be a debugging port, then you can try to connect a debugger to that port, or maybe provide some commands on this. But yeah, right now I don't know exactly if you can really identify it.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Most of the time, so when I want to debug a remote application, I'm too late with debugging and it already started. So especially when I want to debug something in the beginning. So is there a way that I can actually start a debugger on the right time when it starts the application, or the other way around, because then I'm not too late for the startup debugging.
Yeah, actually, this is pretty easy, which I can show you here. So if I wait a second, I'll make it a little bit bigger. So this is my my prompt here, and these are the arguments that I am passing. And here is a little suspend no. I just need to set it to yes. And afterwards, the application waits until some debugger is connected. So let me show. I will connect my debug. Now I'm connected, and then the application starts up.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
having me. Are there any more questions? You can. If there are no other questions anymore, then I want to thank you, Wolfgang. I really enjoyed your talk. Hope to